I arrived at the holiday brunch with my kids. Dad smirked. This was meant to be a nice day. Why did you come? My son looked at me. Should we leave? I said, yes, right now. An hour later, Dad regretted his words. I'm Alice. I'm the daughter who always says yes. The one who shows up, covers the bill, takes the phone calls at 2 a.m., and hands over money even when I barely have enough for myself. The last month alone, I sent over $700 to my parents. Half of it was for my dad's urgent car repairs, which, funny enough, turned into a new outdoor smoker and a pair of Bluetooth headphones for his walks. A few weeks before that, my mom asked for help paying her dental bill, then posted a photo of her spa day with a friend in a hotel suite. I didn't even ask. I never do. They've always been like that. Selfish, but embarrassingly proud of how little they give in return. My mom told me once that having me at 17 ruined her body. I was 10. That was the moment I understood what it meant to be an obligation. My dad, when he's drunk, and that's often, likes to joke that if condoms weren't so expensive in the 90s, he'd have a boat by now. No one ever corrects him. So I say yes. Yes to bringing the kids to their house, even though my mother criticizes their clothes and my dad calls my daughter moody if she doesn't hug him. Yes to paying for their Wi-Fi so they can stream shows and ignore my calls. Yes to keeping a shared account just for emergencies, which they treat like a vending machine with my name on it. So, when the usual text came through, holiday brunch tomorrow, I almost didn't respond. But I did. We'll be there. I got the kids up early, dressed them nice, even straightened my daughter's hair, and let my son bring his Switch in the car. Picked up a box of pastries on the way. I wore the necklace my mom once liked, even though the clasp scratches my neck. When we got there, the door was unlocked. No one greeted us. The TV was blasting some morning game show. My mom was folding napkins like they owed her money. My dad was already halfway into a drink. I stepped in with a smile that no one looked at. He didn't even wait 2 minutes. My dad looked up and said, loud enough for the cousins to hear, "This was meant to be a nice day. Why did you come?" My son glanced at me. "Should we leave?" I said. "Yes, right now. No drama, no scene." I turned. Kids followed. Door shut behind us. Pastries still in my hand, untouched. We ended up at a diner 25 minutes away. I let them order pancakes with chocolate chips and soda at 11, 0 inches the morning. I didn't eat much. Just sipped coffee while the buzzing in my chest settled into something clearer, something final. Exactly 1 hour later, my phone rang. It was him. Not to apologize. Not to ask if the kids were okay. He wanted to know why the shared account suddenly showed a 0 balance. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then I opened my banking app, clicked one last button, and smiled. The first call I ignored. The second one came 5 minutes later. Then a text. "Call me. What the hell is going on?" I knew what was going on. He finally realized he couldn't use my money like a backup credit card anymore. I transferred every last cent from the shared account to mine and submitted a request to close it. I'd been thinking about it for months. I just needed the push. Turns out, all it took was one smug sentence from him in front of my kids. At the diner, my daughter asked if we were ever going back there again. I told her, "Probably not." He shrugged. Good. By the time we got home, I had 6 missed calls. 3 from my dad, 1 from my mom, 2 from a cousin who never talks to me unless there's gossip. I set my phone face down and left it there. The kids settled into the living room with a movie, and I went upstairs and opened the old wooden box I kept in my closet. Inside was every receipt, every transfer, every email they sent asking for help. I started printing them out. This wasn't for them. This was for me. A record of all the times I gave when I shouldn't have. Of all the ways I tried to earn something that should have come freely. Then came the email. Subject line, "Really? After all we've done for you?" It was from my mom. 5 paragraphs of guilt. and zero accountability. Apparently, I was embarrassing them by storming out in front of everyone. She said I was overreacting and making the kids soft. She ended it with, "You're lucky we even include you anymore." That line lit something in me. I clicked reply, and for once, I didn't hold back. I told her how I remembered being 11, and overhearing her tell my aunt that I was never supposed to happen. How she told me to hide my second pregnancy from her friends because she didn't want people thinking I was irresponsible. How she let my dad call me lazy and useless after I got laid off, even when I was still paying their phone bill. I wrote and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. 20 minutes later, my dad called again. I picked up this time. He didn't even say hello, just started in with how I embarrassed him, how everyone at brunch thought I was being dramatic. He told me I better fix the account before bills bounced. I said no. He went quiet. I reminded him that he once said I'd never amount to anything because I got pregnant at 19, that when I graduated community college with honors, he didn't show up because he said it wasn't a real school. I told him I was done letting people who don't respect me live off me. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking, but it felt right. Downstairs, my aunt called, the one who always watched from the sidelines. She said she heard what happened and wanted me to know she was proud of me, that she'd been waiting years for me to cut the cord. Then she said, "Let me tell you what your mom's been saying about you behind your back." I closed the door to my bedroom and sat on the floor while my aunt talked. She didn't hold back. She said my mom had been telling people for years that I was always asking for help, that I was bad with money and couldn't keep a man, that I used my kids to get sympathy, that I'd be lost without them. I laughed out loud at that part. Lost without the two people who never showed up to my baby showers, who forgot my birthday 2 years in a row, who made me bring my own Thanksgiving leftovers home in a plastic grocery bag while my cousin left with a foil tray the size of a suitcase. My aunt kept going. She told me that the reason the family always seemed distant, why no one reached out after my divorce, why people avoided inviting me to gatherings, it was because of them. My mom had been painting me as unstable, overly sensitive, hard to deal with. It wasn't just that they didn't defend me. They made sure I was the family punchline. I stayed quiet while my aunt talked, let her empty it all out. She said she wanted to step in years ago, but didn't want to make things worse for me. But now that I'd finally drawn a line, she wasn't going to stay silent anymore. She ended the call with something I didn't expect. "If you need anything, you come to me. You've done enough for them." That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't stop replaying the moments I used to defend them. When my friends asked why I still talked to them, I always had some excuse. They had a rough life. They don't know better. They mean well. None of that was true. I went back through my emails, printed out more receipts. The list was longer than I thought. I wrote dates and reasons next to every transfer. Dad's insurance deductible, casino weekend, Mom's prescription money, new designer handbag she posted a week later, birthday gift for my cousin she forgot to shop for. Every lie, every manipulation on paper, all at once. And I still hadn't told my kids what really happened. I didn't want to turn them against their grandparents, but I also wasn't going to lie anymore. The next morning, my son asked if we'd be seeing Grandpa again. I told him, probably not. He nodded. Good. He's mean to you. I nearly broke right there. But I held it in. Instead, I took the printed papers, put them in a folder, and labeled it, in case I forget why I stopped answering. By noon, I'd blocked their numbers. And that's when the real chaos started. By the time I blocked their numbers, I felt something close to relief. But peace doesn't last long when you're dealing with people who don't believe they can lose you. It started with a knock on my door 2 days later. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw my cousin Mark standing there with a bag from the bakery we always went to, his kids. I hesitated, then opened it. He didn't say hi, just handed me the bag and said, "You should read the card." Inside was a note in my mom's handwriting. She didn't sign it, just wrote, This is what happens when you turn your back on your family. You don't get to come back. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a threat. It was a declaration. Like I was the one who walked away from something good. Like I was the one breaking the code. I looked at Mark and asked if he agreed with her. He didn't answer. Just said he was told to drop it off. Then he asked if I'd closed the account, because I was in some kind of phase, like I was acting out. I didn't argue. I told him goodbye, closed the door, and tossed the entire bag in the trash. An hour later, I got a call. Not from a blocked number, but from my bank. My dad had tried to log in using my old credentials. When he failed the security check, he called the bank pretending to be me, said his daughter was busy and needed help with the joint account. He gave my social security number. My birthday. They flagged it and froze everything temporarily for my protection. I was stunned. I hadn't expected him to go that far. Then I remembered I'd sent him a photo of my license years ago when he needed my ID for a notarized form. He'd kept it. The betrayal had layers I hadn't even reached yet. I went to the bank in person, explained everything, showed the folder of printed evidence. The woman helping me blinked a few times and said quietly, "You should think about getting legal protection." I didn't want to believe it was that serious. Then I got the email from an address I didn't recognize, but the writing was unmistakable. My dad again. He said I'd made a fool of the family, that people were asking questions, and I better start clearing up the lies. That if I didn't fix this, he'd tell the rest of the family what kind of mother I really was. That line got to me. Not because it scared me, but because it was stupid. My kids were the only people whose opinion I cared about, and they knew who I was. They saw me exhausted, working 2 jobs, making boxed mac and cheese stretch for 2 days, putting every dollar toward rent, food, their clothes. They knew I was trying, but it still stung. The way they twisted things so easily. The next day, my aunt showed up at my house with a manila envelope. She said, "I think it's time you see something." Inside were printouts, screenshots, photos, text messages my mom had sent to various family members over the years. Screenshots of her mocking my job, telling people I chose to be broke, joking that I was addicted to being the victim. Even a message where she implied I might not know who my son's real father was. My hands went cold. Then I saw the last photo. It was a picture of my dad smiling with a check in his hand. A check I had written to cover their mortgage 2 years ago. Caption said, "When you raise a sucker, but it finally pays off." That was the moment something in me broke for good. I sat on the edge of the couch holding that photo like it was a piece of rotting meat. My aunt didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, arms crossed, waiting for me to speak. But I couldn't. Not yet. That photo of my dad grinning with the check was burned into my brain. I remembered the exact day I gave it to him. It was winter. The heater in my apartment had broken, and I'd been layering socks on my kids' feet at night. But when he called and said the bank was about to foreclose, I didn't even hesitate. I wired the money, went to sleep in a freezing apartment, and told myself that's just what you do for family. That check had almost cleaned out my savings. He'd called me his little lifesaver that day, told me I had a good heart. Meanwhile, he was sending photos to his friends, calling me a sucker. I looked up at my aunt and asked why she had all this now. She said another cousin had come forward. Someone who'd been on the family group chat I wasn't even in. Apparently my mom and dad had been talking behind my back for years, making jokes, spinning lies, turning people against me. But now that I'd finally cut them off, cracks were showing. People were starting to ask questions. And one of them had sent the proof to my aunt, who'd finally had enough. She said, "You need to protect yourself. I think they're not done." I didn't know what she meant until that night. I got an email from the local police department. A fraud report had been filed against me. My dad claimed I'd stolen from him, said I'd cleaned out his account without permission and refused to give it back. Attached were forged screenshots, sloppy ones, but enough to get someone's attention. It was clear now. He wasn't just mad. He was trying to ruin me. I drove straight to the police station the next morning, brought every document, every receipt, every message, and the full timeline of what really happened. The officer I met with raised an eyebrow halfway through and asked, "Do you want to file a restraining order?" I said, "Yes." It felt strange asking the law to protect me from my own father, but it felt necessary. Later that afternoon, my kids came into the room while I was on hold with the county clerk. My daughter sat beside me and asked why Grandpa was trying to hurt us. I didn't know how to answer, but before I could even try, my son said, "He's just mad you're not giving him money anymore." It was jarring hearing it so clearly from a 10-year-old, but he was right. That's all it ever was. As long as I kept paying, I was useful. The second I stopped, I became the villain. That night, I blocked 5 more numbers. 2 cousins, one of my mom's old friends, someone I didn't even recognize. The smear campaign was clearly on a full sprint. But I didn't care anymore. I'd seen everything I needed. Then, just as I thought the worst was over, I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a decade. My brother. I hadn't heard from my brother in nearly 10 years. He moved out at 17 and never looked back. I used to call him selfish for disappearing. Now, I realized he'd just been the first one to save himself. The message came through on Facebook. All it said was, "I heard what they did. I'm sorry it took this long. I believe you." I stared at that line for a long time. I didn't even know he followed what was going on. I barely remembered what his voice sounded like. We messaged back and forth a little. He told me that everything I was discovering now, he saw years ago. That's why he left. He said the only reason he hadn't reached out sooner was because our dad told him I wanted nothing to do with him, that I blamed him for abandoning the family. A complete lie. He said, "They're experts at turning people against each other." They tried it with me too. The pain hit differently now, not just for what they did to me, but for how many years they stole from us both by keeping us apart, for how they poisoned every relationship that didn't serve them. That night, I added him to my phone again, saved as Jason. Not brother, not maybe, just Jason. And then I did what I should have done years ago. Posted. I didn't go into details. I didn't name names. But I wrote the truth, that I would no longer be supporting people who disrespected me. That financial abuse is real, even when it's family. That loyalty without respect is slavery in disguise. And that I wasn't going to shrink any more to make selfish people comfortable. The response was immediate. Some people unfollowed me. A few messaged me privately with nasty comments. People clearly sent by my parents to stir the pot. But far more reached out with support. Some even shared their own stories. It was like opening a window and realizing the house wasn't empty after all. My aunt called me again. Said she saw the post and she was proud. Then my daughter walked into the room holding her sketchbook. She flipped to a page she'd drawn while I was on the phone. It was a picture of her brother, and me sitting at the diner, pancakes on the table, all of us smiling. She said, "I like it when it's just us." That's when I knew this wasn't a breakdown. It was a rebuild. That night, I sat with my kids on the couch, turned off my phone for the first time in weeks, and promised them out loud that I would never again let anyone treat us like we were disposable. Not even family. Especially not family. And I kept that promise. The account stayed closed. The number stayed blocked. And my dad, for the first time in his life, learned what it felt like to ask and hear the word no. From now on, he'd have to get used to the silence.